A shark swims through the ocean, hunting for food. Then, something comes into view ahead of it. Something that makes it turn and swim away as fast as it can. What could be powerful enough to make this king of ocean predators flee? And what does that have to do with your writing? Pull up a chair and let's find out. Hi all, Rob here. Welcome to Stories Made Simple. In this episode, we're going to start talking about the spine of action. No, that isn't the name of a new oceanic superhero, but a way to keep your stories on track and focused towards a clear and logical ending. But before we get into that, let's do a little review. Stories, as you should know by now, are built around a subject, an action, and a result. These are the fundamental requirements for something to be a story. Now, like subjects, actions come in all shapes and sizes. Some actions are very small and simple, like running between 2 points. Others are a little larger and more complex, like baking. Either of these could be the action at the heart of a story, but if we look closer, we can see there's a pretty big difference between these two. If we hover over the smaller action, we can see it's just sitting there by itself. After all, if you run, you run. Not much else to it, right? But if we take a closer look at its larger friend, we can see that some actions, especially bigger ones, are actually not a single action at all, but a whole bunch of smaller ones bundled together to look like a big one. They're not a single action, but a group of actions working together to complete a single larger goal. Just like a school of fish who swim together to make themselves look like a single larger fish to scare away predators, like sharks, for example. So, what does this mean for writing stories? Well, if you think about it, stories are very rarely based around small actions like run, jump, eat, read, wash. Instead, they're made up of big actions like winning, getting, finding, saving, or escaping. Why? Because these are big actions that usually require the character to do a whole bunch of small actions to finish. For example, to find a lost dog, you would need to design posters, print copies of the posters, put up posters, search the area, talk to people, and do a whole lot of walking. All of these are separate, smaller actions, but together they tell the story of bringing a lost dog home. Watching someone do a lot of smaller actions gives us a much better chance to learn from a story than just watching someone do a simple thing like running from place to place. So this is why most stories are based around big and broad actions. And the story itself is usually about seeing the main character doing all those little actions they need to do to finish the story and the results that go with them. This really shouldn't be much of a surprise. Think about it. When someone asks you what a book or movie is about, your answer will usually be, it's about a character trying to X. It's about a man trying to find his lost love. It's about a woman trying to save a kingdom. It's about a group of knights trying to stop a dragon. We usually say trying to because we want to leave it open if they succeed. But the truth is, those key words, find, save, and stop, are all the big actions that story is built around. Writers refer to these big actions that a whole story is based around as the spine of action. It's called a spine because just like that thing in your back, it holds the whole story up. And, just like a real spine, it has a couple of important jobs. It tells where the head of the story is, the start. It connects the parts of the story together. It also tells us where the bottom of the story is. You know, the ending. The story starts near where the spine of action begins, and the story ends where the spine of action finishes. And it makes sure that everything in between is all connected. Going back to our story from last episode, Tim wanted to get a high score on his history test. So that became the spine of action for that story. The story then started when the teacher assigned the test and Tim decided to try for that high score. And the story finished when Tim got his score. Those were the head and tail of the story, and everything in between them had to connect with that head and that tail. When he was studying, working with his classmates, and asking extra questions, those were other actions that were connected with the main action of getting a high score. As long as the things he was doing connected up with the beginning and the end, they belonged in the story. Anything extra, like sleeping, singing, or dating, didn't belong in the story because it wasn't part of the main action Tim was taking. In fact, That's a great way to know if something belongs in your story or not. Does it connect with the spine of action? Is the thing the character is doing something that is part of the main action they're taking? Because if it's not, then it doesn't belong in the story, and you should probably remove it. Everything in a story needs to be linked to the spine of action of that story in some way. And if they're not, then you need to get rid of them or replace them with something that is. The other major way the spine of action helps us is by telling us what we need to include in the story. You just need to think through the actions the character takes to accomplish their goal, and those become the things you need to show. But we'll talk about that in more detail next time. For now, just remember this. Most stories are built around a single large action which has a bunch of smaller steps, and we call that big action the spine of action. Also, the spine of action holds the story together and tells us both the beginning and the end, and what belongs and what doesn't. So when you write a story, make sure you know what its spine of action is. If you can't tell or it doesn't have one, you have a bunch of thinking to do. See you next time for more on the spine of action. Happy writing! Homework. Pick your 10 favorite stories and write down what their spines of action are. Books, comics, movies, doesn't matter. What is the main action those stories are about? If you're not sure, just think how you describe them to your friend in one sentence. The key action word of that sentence, that's your spine. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, as I'll be releasing more videos in this series and you don't want to miss out. If you want to support the channel, check out my books. They're chock full of storytelling goodness and can help you become a better writer. Thanks again. See you next time.